Are you
I'm
good? Is
sort
this?
of in transit a little bit here, but I'm ready. I'm ready
Oh,
to talk
okay.
about
We're gonna work
things.
it out.
Yeah, we can work it out.
Okay. All right. That's what's up.
Hey,
That's what's up.
everybody.
All right. Well, glad you could join us, Bri. I'm gonna jump in with your bio because I want people to be clear off top. Okay.
That's right.
All right. So this is Bri M. Thank you again.
It's actually
And
Bri,
Bri,
but yeah,
Bri,
it's actually
thank you.
Bri.
Thank you.
Bri like
Thank you.
fry.
Got it. Thank you. Clear
Yep.
for the rest of my life now. So
Okay.
Bri M. Okay. Z pronunciations.
Pronouns.
Pronouns.
Mm-hmm.
Zer.
Yep.
A Black Jamaican American queer, non-binary, disabled alien prince from the Bronx. Bronx
That's
stand up.
right. That's right.
Z
BX
is a
all
pod.
day.
Word up. Word up. Z is a podcaster and political agitator with a fierce desire to change the way disabled people are seen in mass media. Z is the host and executive producer of Power Not Pity, a podcast about the lives of disabled people of color. Bri is currently a 2019 Echoing Ida Fellow and was a 2019 Stitcher Breakthrough Fellow. Z was a 2019 Work It presenter. In addition, shit, I did it again. Bri is a member of the 2018 Made in New York Podcast Certificate Program cohort. So
Yeah.
what I can see is that I'm trying to be like you when I grow up. So that's what's up.
You got
So
jokes.
what's up, Brian? What's up? What's up? How are you today?
You know, I'm out
Living
here
a dream,
trying
right?
to enjoy a nice day in Long Beach.
All right. Okay. Dope, dope, dope. Well, I would say I'm not gonna hold you long, but I'm gonna hold you for this hour that we have. All right.
Yeah, yeah,
So, all right,
yeah.
cool, cool, cool. So let's jump in, Brian. So, how did you get into podcasting? Like, what's your
All
story?
right. So my story. Well, I started listening to podcasts. I'd say probably about like 5 years ago, maybe. And I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis 6 years ago. So I started listening to podcasts when I was like just early in my disability, and it was just a really good place to like escape to, you know. And I found that there wasn't really much visibility or representation around disabled folks, especially disabled folks of color,
Hmm.
in podcasting. So I was like, you know what? I got to start this shit for myself. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
what I did.
basically.
I started in 2017. And, since there, people have just been really supportive.
Dope, dope, dope. So why Power Not Pity? You could have done any title, any theme. So talk to us about it.
Anything?
Yeah.
Nah, I couldn't have done anything. I just feel like at this point in my life, I just want everybody to know that disabled folks are capable. We're authentic people. We are multiplicitous, like there's not just one type of disabled person,
Yeah,
especially not
absolutely.
one type of black disabled person, right? We out here, we're everywhere. And why not represent us as powerful?
Hmm.
So that's what I came up with the
All
title,
right.
Not Pity.
And how has your audience gravitated to Power Not Pity? Like, is that alone that title enough for people to be like, boom, this is the place I want to be. This is what I want to listen to. How have you been able to connect with your audience and your listeners?
Oh yeah. So people really find themselves in the show. That's what they say. They say that like the interviews are really.
I lost your.
Oh,
Okay,
here I
keep going.
am. I'm here. Um,
Yeah, I see you.
Sorry. I just need to like get my phone charged. Hopefully it won't connect. Sorry, y'all.
No
Um,
problem.
that should be good now. Let's see if I'm charged. Oh, sorry. Sorry, y'all. But I was saying that my audience is really, really special to me. Like it's not just black disabled folks, it's not just disabled folks of color. All types of people have said that they really feel like they can connect with the show. They can find parts of themselves in the show. because we just shoot the shit. We talk shit. We talk about our lives. We talk about our dogs. Like this season, I've been talking about survival and what the idea
Okay.
of survival means for a disabled person of color today and during this time. And the amounts of support I've gotten has just been like mind blowing.
Wow. Wow. That's what's up. I mean, I like that. I mean, survival is one of those things I think all of us are interested in right now, right?
Oh
From,
yeah, oh
you
yeah.
know, getting out of Dodge as quickly as possible to having what we need
Hmm.
if we have to shelter in
Exactly.
place, you know? All those conversations are so
Exactly.
necessary, right? And so I can imagine for people who do have accessibility issues or considerations when it comes to that, it's even more important, right? To understand how to survive and how to maneuver through what none of us knows going on right now in our government and
Yeah,
our
yeah.
lives, you know? Yeah, that's super
Yeah.
important.
And one thing I'm after is not just survival, but also about thriving. Like
Absolutely. Hmm.
we talk about survival, but also I want to lead everyone to a place of understanding what it means to thrive.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've seen the conversation shift in that way for the last few years, right? Even um, people who have dealt with traumas and stuff like that. How can we move from this idea of surviving it or survival, being a survivor, to actually thriving inside of what it is that we've experienced or are currently experiencing? And it is such a powerful way
Yeah.
to look at life, right? Life is such a get to, right?
Yeah.
And when we think about it in those ways that cause us more anguish and mental turmoil than just living in general, our
Yeah.
mind could,
Yeah.
it's good to be able to shift our mind in a way that says, okay, this is actually in some ways a get to, and how do I thrive inside
Mhm.
of the whatever hand I'm dealt, whatever it is, you know. So
Exactly.
dope, dope,
Exactly.
dope. All right, so we talked at length about wanting to make sure that accessibility in all its forms, right, and we'll get into that tonight, accessibility in all its forms can be accomplished when it comes to podcasters. I want to start off with the creators, but I also want to include our listeners because that's a big, it's just as much a big part of this, right? And
Mhm.
so in your opinion, right now as it stands, 2020, where are we as far as accessibility inside of the podcast industry? The lack thereof, or some of the things that you've seen that's improved?
Uh, I I think I want to start from a place of abundance instead of scarcity, right?
Okay.
We've talked about that, something that you've mentioned
Mm-hmm.
before in the past. I've seen on your IG lives, and I love that. I love the way to think of things as like a possibility model, right? And I feel
Mm-hmm.
like my
Mm-hmm.
show is a possibility model for what accessibility can look like in podcasting, right?
Right.
I think right now people are doing a horrible job. There's like no understanding and no consideration. And I will, be talking until I'm blue in the face about something as simple as transcripts. I
Yeah.
mean, you type out the words to these really important and essential stories that we're telling as Black podcasters, right? You reach out and you tell these stories, but you're missing a whole audience that is like millions strong. Deaf and hard of hearing people are like, we're out there and they want to know our stories too. They
Mm-hmm.
love podcasts as much as anyone else. So, there's an audience that you're missing when you forget to just even consider the power of written language.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think, when we're talking about accessibility, there are tips and tricks on how to make your things like logistically accessible, right? But how do we move from logistics to like making things accessible on a like level of principle, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, you got your podcast, right? You're starting out, you got some really good ideas about where you want to go, and you know that you have an audience. And so now you want to make it more accessible. You can use transcripts. You can use audio descriptions. You can, I mean, and these are things that I would love to go into detail about, but I'm just going to
Yeah,
list.
please.
You can
Yeah.
use audio descriptions. You can use image descriptions. You can also use, it's a variation of all types of media, right? It's not just only, it doesn't only have to be about the audio when it comes to the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
podcast, right?
Yeah.
But I think like once you start to put those technical pieces into place, I would hope that, you know, you open up your mind to not only what an accessible podcast can look like, but an accessible story, and then
Mm-hmm.
hopefully to what a more accessible world can look like.
Yeah.
So, yeah, yeah,
Okay. All right. And we're gonna have our meetup on during the festival, where I'm hoping that
yeah.
the things that you listed can be more detailed out, and even those applications that are available, because we know the human experience, right? When you don't know what to do,
Mm-hmm,
typically you do nothing at all,
mm-hmm.
right? And
Exactly.
when it's not your experience, if I break my leg and no one else is gonna feel it but me, and I've got to
Yeah,
explain it to them, and so it's one of those things
right.
where we do want to prioritize and be considerate of what the world is, right, and everything. And we talked about
Mm-hmm,
this ourselves, is that any community should represent every single person inside of the society, inside the community. If it
yeah,
doesn't represent that, then you're missing people. you know, folks are missing,
exactly.
and we don't want that, right? So
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
all right.
You
So beyond,
always
go
want to
ahead.
consider, always want to consider the person who is like most marginalized in any
Hmm.
situation, you know? And typically it's usually disabled people of color. Let's be real, black disabled people,
Hmm.
black queer disabled people, black like gender variant houseless people, you know? We're typically the ones at the bottom because we're typically the ones that are most invisibilized and
Hmm.
most cast away from society. And our stories are so much more important because of those reasons.
Yeah, yeah. All right. And so we talk about not just audio, right? It translates over into our events, our live shows, our
Hmm.
virtual events, and
Hmm.
all that sort of thing. In which again, without considering it, then there are people who want to attend your event, want to attend your live show, but they can't because there's not accessibility for the building, or there's not going to be translation when they're there. And so talk
Hmm.
about that a little bit more. How can we start to prioritize and just kind of create from the space that there may be someone who is impaired in some way or disabled in some way
Hmm.
that would like to be a part of this. How can I make sure that I'm accountable for that?
Yeah, definitely. Oh, it's so simple. Um, this is something that I will always say is just, you know, we got to pass the mic. We got to take care to actually ask this person who maybe, you know, would want to attend this event. I'm a firm believer in having people tell their own stories and tell what
Hmm.
they need in the moment. So, you know, like first and foremost, ask disabled people of color around you. Ask black disabled people like, yo, what do you need? I'm making this event. I know that you know, the accommodations might not be there for you, but what can I do to change that? Because, you know, we will probably have a really easy answer for you.
Hmm.
I think that's a big that's a great place to start.
Yeah. No, I think that's important too. I always say the same way, community organizations, especially when we're creating there's a tendency, and it's our education model really. There's a tendency to give people what we think they want versus
Mhm.
asking, being the outsider in, the outsider looking in and saying, this is what
Yeah.
everybody needs. This is what they want.
Yeah.
And people will actually
Yep.
say, actually, that's not what I need or want. This is actually
Mhm.
it. And
Mhm.
so you're right. The conversations have to occur. And like you said, it's easy as well because there are people around. They people exist around you at all spaces, and it's
Yep. Yep.
more often than not you haven't even thought to ask what it is. And to
Exactly.
me,
Listen, like, oh,
go for it.
sorry, I'm
No,
like
please,
about to cut
please,
you off,
please.
but like, I think it's just important to like iterate that disabled people make up like 25% of the population in the US. So that's like millions of us, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Someone around you might not look disabled, but there is such a thing as an invisible disability, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I just think it's so important to have representation. This is something I say like all the time throughout my different episodes is that representation matters.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just think it's so important to have people on the mic who represent what your story is about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. All right. And Latrice, I do see your question. There's so many, and that's going to be the opportunity inside of the meetup as well. And we'll also be providing stuff now that we this is it. This is the piece where
Yeah,
awareness, starts. And so it's about starting
definitely.
to even provide, doing a whole email and a whole social media campaign and whatever on what it looks like, what it could look like, how to be
Hmm.
inclusive, in a way, because we all know um, that some communities have a tendency to be biased, selective, prejudice, all sorts of
Exactly.
things. And Afros and Audio is not one of those communities. And so it's about us working to figure out how can we, because there are going to be blind spots. You can't know what you don't
Hmm.
know, but it's not okay to
Hmm.
never figure it out and look, and find out for yourself. So
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
that's where we're at with it. There's plenty of information out there. It's just really what you're choosing at this point.
Exactly.
You know what I'm
Exactly.
saying? So
Exactly.
so let's talk about our listeners, right? We talked about
Hmm.
creatives and how they can create, but what are some of the things that you hear from your listeners when it comes to podcasting or being, or creative endeavors in general? How do we consider
Hmm.
our listeners as well?
Definitely. How do we consider our listeners? I think something that I find a lot of disabled people of color say is that like they just feel isolated, you know?
Mm,
And I think something that we could do for at least my listeners is to let them know that they're not alone. Something that I love about podcasting is that, one of the big things I love about podcasting is that it's so intimate and
mm-hmm,
stories are things that we automatically gravitate towards, since the beginning of time, Neanderthal days. Like it's just something that is so easy to comprehend. And I just feel like when you're thinking about accessibility and what it can mean for a listener, I I almost want to say that like disabled people tend to be on the margins,
mm-hmm,
and it's hard for people to understand what we go through. And something that like I've said before is that you don't get it until you get it. And like I became disabled 6 years ago, so before then, in my 20s, I just thought that I was out here like being just like everybody else. And then I became disabled and I started seeing all of these different things around me, like all of these different people who are also disabled, just seeing that disability is something that ultimately everyone will come to, and it touches everything.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, because like you said, I mean, we can look around us and say, okay, that person is disabled, that person is disabled, but there's also so many invisible disabilities, um, that come with either it's truly invisible, it's internal, and no one would know unless someone told them. But there's also
Mm-hmm.
invisible disabilities that are covered up,
Yeah.
for the shame of it, or what have you. And so those are things that we get to connect with. We get to understand that there are so
Mm-hmm.
many stories, and even opening ourselves up to the stories, to
Exactly.
listening.
Exactly.
You might not um, think you have any reason to listen to Power Not Pity, but you have every reason to listen to Power Not Pity, right? Because this is where
Mm-hmm.
you're going to get
Mm-hmm.
exposed to different stories and different experiences we, us, don't even consider until we're faced with it,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
so yeah, yeah, okay. All right, so what's your ultimate vision for, if you had a checklist and an ultimate vision for accessibility and podcasting and creativity? What does that look like to you? How does that look and feel, that everything was exactly as it should be?
Uh, Talib, it's gonna look like global domination, okay? Disabled
Nice.
people
All
of
right.
color taking over
Yes.
everything,
Yes.
right?
All right.
Telling our stories, feeling free enough to express ourselves without fear of ignorance and ableism,
Mm-hmm.
and without fear of having people tell us something really, like, uh hurtful even. I think what I would want to see in the future for me, for the show, uh, you know, always having more people listen, always having more people connect with not just me, but the other people involved in the show.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, this is what I would love to see. If, no, not if, when I create a podcast network for disabled people of color to actually get together, it's going to be
Mm-hmm.
a collective, not just a network, not anything corporate, because, fuck that noise. That's all
Word.
about gatekeeping. And for me, what I would want to see in an accessible podcasting culture is for people to actually come together, for people to share stories, for people to like come from a place of being one with each other, being understanding that when we include everyone's story, we're better for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And how do we encourage more disabled, invisible, or visible um, creatives to show up for themselves, not only show up for themselves, but show up for the communities in which they could and get to represent. How do we encourage more, besides being welcoming, and being saying you're welcome here, and this is where this
Mm-hmm.
is created for you. How do we encourage more voices? Because I know that's something that we're looking to do, is increase Black podcasters in the marketplace,
Yeah,
and help with
yeah.
sustainability.
Definitely, definitely. I mean, I think the biggest factor in helping more Black disabled people get into podcasting and getting into telling their own stories and their own lived experiences is just to simply like put our resources there,
Yeah.
um, come from the place of like understanding that we don't have to own everything, you know? We don't have to keep our stories close to our chest, right?
Mm. Hmm.
We we as Black disabled people can increase our listenership, like get all of us together telling our stories. Like the way that we do this is together.
Mm.
And I really think that a lot of disabled folks out there, we live on SSI budget. We live on, you know, um, scraps, and we live constantly fighting against ableism, constantly fighting against discrimination. Like we're out here, we're trying to do the things that we're passionate about, but there's always things that hinder us, like legislation against,
Hmm.
healthcare. We
Hmm.
need We need we need free healthcare. We need fair housing. Like we need all the things that we need all of our needs met, right? And I think that coming from that place, understanding that people need their basic needs met, they need to be seen as authentic people. Like I think
Hmm.
that's the way that more disabled folks can be involved in podcasting is knowing that like we don't start from nothing, but like we ultimately need each other. We need help. We need support and resources, but we often find that those resources aren't there for us because
Yeah,
people just don't allocate the resources to us.
yeah, yeah. And you know,
Yeah.
Brian, as I hear you talking, you know, I can't omit the fact that you know you're queer and disabled. And I know that when I first moved to this area, New York, Jersey area, one of the first
Okay.
things that I was looking for doing was being in different communities. So in different organizations, that's where I came from, and I wanted to get back into that. And one of the communities that I saw the most of it were Black queer people. And there's the
Mm-hmm.
Audre Lorde Foundation here. And I remember going to an Audre Lorde meeting, and then from there going out to a march with trans folk who were about housing, like standing in front of whatever building there was,
Big
and
condos. Yep.
yelling
Yep.
up, yeah, and yelling about housing. I'm like, I just came to New York. I don't know shit
Exactly.
about shit, but I'm standing there yelling too at this building that I don't know about, right? So but what you're saying about disabled folks, and I'm sure for you, even being queer and having that experience informs like the same scenario, the lack of funding, the lack of resources, the invisibility, the way in which people were rather cast aside. And it's almost like you said too, where you know, where priorities are different. Like people were talking about, you know, marriage, same sex marriage. And some black queer folks are like, that ain't my highest priority right now. I got other
Yeah.
priorities like
Exactly.
housing. You know what I
Exactly.
mean? So it's interesting. I'm hearing the you know how they align, right? And I mean they align obviously
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
it's life for you, but it also I wonder about the advocacy in you that translates here, if that
Yeah.
was a clear question. The
Um.
advocacy you've had to do in the past, maybe if you did
Yeah.
do any advocacy, you know, for the queer community, and it translates into even this disabled, you know, understanding what advocacy looks like for disabled people as well.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, like I can't divorce my queerness from my identity as a person with MS, right? I
Hmm.
can't
Hmm.
divorce my blackness from, the fact that I like love talking about disability justice and social
Hmm.
justice and what that means, right? Like those are intertwined, but I find myself often having to decide, like when I go to an event or if I go to something that is for disabled folks, like am I gonna show up as black today or disabled today? Am I gonna show up as queer today or like
Hmm.
any other identity I fall into, right? So I just think that my advocacy, it just goes hand in hand, like
Yeah.
I can't be one or the other. Like you're gonna get a black person, you're gonna get a queer person, you're gonna get a disabled person,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, and the struggle is just it's hard, like it's hard when people don't understand that we are stronger together than we are apart.
Hmm.
We're stronger together than we are in smaller groups. And my thing is like, I just wish that more people would consider disabled folks in the struggle because we're there,
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
every axis we are there.
Hmm. Yes, yes, yes. And I can imagine the podcast is an avenue for you to show up fully.
Yeah,
And
definitely, definitely.
yeah,
It's difficult though.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for asking that. That wasn't on my list of questions, but it came up for me. So, um, so we and you talked about this already, about the collective, right? The community. And we talked about there's 7 billion people in the world. So your collective might have, some of them, but it won't have the 7 billion, right? So, or
Yeah,
what I'm
yeah.
trying to say. So it's like, what's your vision for this collective, and what would be the draw? What would be the importance of someone like you just said? We are stronger together. That's obvious. So, but tell us more about your collective and your vision for it, and what that gets to look like for people who we are encouraging to get more into podcasting and or simply show up for themselves in whichever way they get to show up.
Wow. Now you're letting me dream, which is something I don't get to do very often,
Long
especially
live the
like,
dreamers. Long live the
long live the
dreamers.
dreamers. Yes. Um, wow. I mean, it would be amazing if people could just see that this collective that I want to create is running counter to everything that podcasting stands for. You know,
Hmm.
like we are here to represent people who don't get to speak, don't get to be heard, don't get to be experienced. And I think that what I'd want to see for this collective is for people to understand that we don't have to go the typical route, right? Podcasting is so successful and viable because it's so easy to do it. You don't
Hmm.
even
Hmm.
you don't even need a mic. You just grab your phone, stick it in somebody's face, and say, "Hey,
Yeah.
what's your story?"
Hmm.
So in that way, podcasting is something that is so special and unique to me because anyone can come to it, anyone can find their power there, and I just feel like if this collective, if this network, this like media hub that I want to create for disabled folks of color, like I just want people to get together and understand that disabled people exist, and that like Black disabled people are real, and we're not just things that are like outside of your periphery. You're not going to pay attention because it's not
Hmm.
you. Like I
Hmm.
would I would love if the average person, let's say an able-bodied person, able-bodied Black
Hmm.
person was just like podcasting out there in the world and came upon my collective. I'd want them to actually engage with it and see that, yeah, like this is my grandma over here. This is like,
Hmm.
you know, my uncle over there. Like these are people who I know and who I see in community. And if my story is out there, if another disabled youth's story is out there, like it would just make it a lot easier for people to see that um, we're human
Yeah.
and that our stories matter too.
Yeah. And it's powerful, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
Not pitiful.
definitely.
Yeah.
Not
It's
pitiful.
powerful.
That's right.
Right.
That's
Right.
right.
Absolutely.
Claps to you.
Absolutely. Nice, nice, nice. So, that's a beautiful thing. And I do think, which I told you, that it's completely possible, right? And it's about
Yeah,
um, you being willing to create it, create space so that other people get willing to create space as well, because that's how it happens. Once they
that's how it
see that,
happens.
oh, y'all over there thriving, oh, y'all over there got some resources because of what y'all doing. Let me take this to my city, or let me take this to the community I know about and tell them what's possible for us too. Um, and why
Exactly.
it's so important that each of us are able to represent in our own way, because all of us have something going on. The author, and I can't think of her name right now, and I will not, so I'm not even trying to. But when she talked about the danger of a single story,
mm,
the danger of that single
mm,
story, and how whatever, and mostly marginalized get this. They'll hear one story, and then now that's the whole story of that whole community that they'll run with, and start asking black folk, do you know this such and such because he black too, or
Yep,
whatever.
yep.
Um, so it's so important. I just want to continue to encourage you to go for that, and
Thank you.
we
Thank you, Taylor.
we
Appreciate
for
that.
sure, for sure. We got your back, because it is super important. Um, so we're doing our meetup. We're gonna do our meetup on Sunday from, I believe
Hmm.
it's 12:45 to 1:30. And
Hmm.
what can folks expect from that? I'm hoping that it's going to be an open discussion and people can come and ask their questions, but also are
Hmm.
informed, because we want people to walk away like, got it.
Informed. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I mean, you said it perfectly. Like, I want to be able to talk about the different resources that we have.
Hmm.
And I'm not talking like financial resources. I'm talking about like viable, tangible resources that people can
Hmm.
come away with. Like, different ways they can make their podcast accessible right now, like at this very minute.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think another thing I want people to come away with is just that, like we're cool, like we're very approachable. Like our stories are, something that can be comprehended, understood. Like I would hope that people would come away feeling like, all right, I got this, and now I have a whole new group of people I can interview or engage with, or
Hmm.
I have a whole new group of audience members that I can, um, what's the word? Uh, I have a whole new group of audience members that I can um, entertain.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, because it's still fun, right? Learning
Exactly,
about people and
exactly,
then experiencing people. Again, to me, it's a get to. It's not something that I got to do or have to do or need to do.
exactly.
It's
Yeah,
and when you're into storytelling and understanding that lived experiences are just that, a person's own personal perspective and lived experiences, that's exciting to me, and we
hmm.
definitely want more people to get excited about just learning about the folks that exist in this world, because then everything kind of shifts, you know. You stop.
Exactly,
The
exactly,
hope is you stop being so self-centered and
exactly.
expand,
The hope is that
expand.
culture shift will
Right,
occur.
right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah. Because I'd love to see like young black disabled folks coming up and saying, "Yeah, I can do a podcast too." And hey, I can take it over there to my friends, and we're talking about something completely new. Like, what is it? What is the story of a young black disabled queer? Like, what does that
Yeah,
look like today,
yeah.
or what does that look like for you know a young black disabled activist? Like these are
Mhm,
the stories that we're
mhm.
missing, and so I'm just hoping that people come away with the feeling that there are options. There are even more options now.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I'm excited about this. I really am. I'm excited about um what we get to create moving forward, right? Admittedly,
Hmm.
we're all in our, for the most part, all in our little bubbles, right? And so while we have
Yeah.
the horse blinders on, considering, what surviving, thriving, income, all the sorts of things, um, it's just not all about that. Sometimes it's also about expanding our reach and expanding the people that we know, and that we care for, and that we
Yeah.
allow to care for us, because it's the same
Yep.
thing. It's a powerful thing. There's no lack in you advocating and caring for me, just as much as there's no lack in it for me, for you, and so that's so
Exactly.
important.
Exactly.
Yeah. Um, One of the things, and I mentioned this to you in the email, I sound engineer a podcast for my best friend who has two sons who are on the autistic spectrum, and I've
Hmm.
learned so much about advocacy, and she is coming at it from school, right? Starting from school, how do we advocate and how do we let folks know that we're in charge of the advocacy, right? The parents are in charge of
Yep.
the advocacy. And one of the things that was stood out to me so much, and I'd like for you to speak on this. One of our last guests, they talked about how everyone in the system will revolve and evolve around these children nonstop. They'll come and they will go, and the constant is that parent, and the other constant is that child, right? So
Yep.
there's that need for a parent to get it, understand it, understand every aspect of it, understand what schools may be trying to do to make your child invisible and go away. There she is, right there, Jeannie Dawkins. That's her
Hello.
podcast. um, but um, but also that that child is empowered, right? To know that this
Exactly.
is my life. Everyone is everyone could come and they could go inside of the advocacy and or the support and resources for me. But how do I stay connected to? I'm the one that's got to be the clearest on my
Yeah.
needs, my wants, and my advocacy. And so, how do you translate that one to advocacy in general, but also in the creative aspect of it all? You know, being independent, being knowing who you are above and beyond anyone else's voice or noise.
Yeah. Um, Something that I really loved that what we talked about, when we were meeting, just you and me, we talked about the why. Like, why do we do what we do? What are our motivations? And what do we go back to when things seem difficult or when, the system is just against you, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I think it's so important to think about what is motivating you, like what is keeping you engaged, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what is keeping you in the moment? What is driving you? And I think I know for me personally, it's always going back to community, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's always going back to the people who, have graced me with their presence,
Mm-hmm.
so people who have been so kind to tell me their stories and been so kind to like allow me to literally manipulate their words and their
Mm-hmm.
experience. And I think when you're like thinking about people who have to work the hardest to get themselves heard, um, it's part of the struggle, and it's part of kind of what builds the integrity that I find so many disabled people of color have, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's in the struggle that you get stronger and that
Mm-hmm.
you get more connected to who you are as a person. And I think that is so important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's dope. All right, thank you. I think we have time for one more question, and I'm trying to remember it right now. it was,
Are you talking
it
about
was
Latrice's question? Or
no. Look, you
was
can go.
it?
No, you can definitely go to Latrice's question, when she said, "I'm always scared to do transcripts because I feel like my spoken words don't make as much sense written. Is it okay? Is it
Mm,
okay to actually craft the transcripts to make them make sense?" Well,
yes. Okay. This is something that I love because one I had one person tell me like um you got to own it. You got to own it, Bri. And I say that to say like your voice is your voice, Latrice. Like you got a transcript that you want to put out in the world. I think you should just do it in your voice because nobody's out here checking you, right? Like I feel like you got something going on in the transcript that's like not traditional, or maybe the flip side we could say too black, right?
hmm hmm
Like just leave it in there, leave it in there for spice, leave it in there for magic. Like that's what makes it so unique. And I think when you're thinking about your transcript, you got to come from your own voice. You got to come from the person's voice who is involved with your podcast. If it's like an interview podcast, or if it's just you speaking on your truth, right? Like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you, I don't think that anyone should feel fearful for not being able to use their voice, their own
Yeah.
authentic voice, right?
Yeah.
Like I've spent so much of my life saying, "Oh, well, I can't say this," or "Oh, I can't be this," or like, I have to like
Same. Mm-hmm.
assimilate, and that's just
Yeah.
not the way it has to be. Like we can run this shit. We can run it, and
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
truly believe that. Yeah.
Yeah. I do too. I do too. My wife, who started working from home, she had a, a video conference with one of her people today, and she was like, "I'm not taking
Yeah.
out my nose ring," and I'm like, "Why would you? And why did you even consider it? You know, like it's like she's like, "Well, I don't wear a hoop at the office," and I'm like, "Listen, bro, it's 2020. You know, at
It's
this point,
2020.
at this point, like
We
I
made
think."
it. We're good.
Authenticity rules the day, and no longer being in a conversation of what is palatable. Like,
Exactly.
you know what I mean?
Exactly.
And because
Yep.
you and I talked about this, and I say it all the time, the longer we go along to get along, the longer we'll have to go along to get along. The moment we
Say it.
say, fuck this, and here I am, and that's it, then we get to move on with that conversation, right? But
Exactly.
the longer we keep,
Exactly.
yeah. So it's important. It's important for all of us to be in that conversation every day. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
to
And that's
simply
the way we
be.
grow.
Yeah, absolutely,
Hmm.
absolutely.
Hmm.
So I wanted to ask you, because I do follow several different black disabled people on Twitter, right? And they
Okay.
talked about crypto vote and all this sort of thing this year that happened. And then also
Hmm.
in the same conversation, as soon as it was over, like, don't erase the fact that we helped you to win this election. And even though Biden, spoke to it and spoke to many things on the platform, we know what it is. We know what it is. So
Yeah. Don't get me
so
started. Ooh.
right.
Don't
So I
get
don't
me
want to
started.
get
We'll
you
be here for
started.
like another hour.
Right. I don't want to get you started, but I do want to speak on how powerful it is for us to simply be, to show up, and also from the perspective of the person who may or not, because there is a lot, you see it all the time, and that's why I love the title, because you are basically saying to people that off rip, don't come into my space saying, "Oh, you have MS," and "Oh, you're hearing impaired," or anything like that. Don't come into my space that way. Come into the space recognizing
Exactly.
that I am who I am. Whatever I'm thriving through, surviving through, struggling with is my experience, is my lived experience,
Hmm.
and it just and is what it is. And we get to meet as peers. We get to meet at the same on equal playing fields. So, what would you say to that? And what would you say to once again speaking to folks who might be fearful of that, even still in the conversation of that is that's how people are going to either come to me, and so we stay in the shadows, or this is I'm afraid to demand that for myself.
Hmm. 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 That's such a good question. Um, because that is part of what motivates me, is to like try to help this kind of potential person to
Hmm.
understand that there is nothing to fear. There is only strength. There's only magic. There's only good things that come ahead from you opening up your mind. You know, and I think when you're thinking of someone who is just having trouble coming to the identities, or coming to even the word disabled, because a
Hmm.
lot of people have trouble even saying the word disabled. And I think a lot of activists will agree, disability justice activists will agree that we are whole people, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and we are people who are powerful despite the way our bodies move, or despite our disabilities, right? And that's like one of the main tenets of what motivates a lot of us to do what we do. So I think um, just go along with the idea, keep an open mind, and really come to the experience knowing that you will find something that you can connect with, because like I said before, disability touches everything.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get to the core of it, a disabled person is still a person. you know a black disabled
Yeah.
person is still black.
Mm-hmm.
Like we can still come to a place of understanding because we're humans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's up to all of us, right, to change our narrative of ourselves, because I don't give a shit
exactly,
about somebody else's narrative about me. But it's up to
exactly,
us, it's,
exactly.
it's up to us, and it's up to us um to support and respect and understand, that's what it's all about. And so I'm thank you again, Bri, for showing up and being a part of this, and being willing. We talked on what, Sunday, and here we
Yeah,
are today on our live,
on
and
Wednesday, yo,
right,
just making it
right,
happen, and then Sunday,
there we
bam,
go,
we're again. Yeah,
bam,
totally.
yeah, yeah. and
Hmm.
so um and so I'm really, and again, this is simply the beginning, right? This is simply the beginning of a
Yep,
conversation that has been long needed to be had, um, but also long needed to be incorporated and considered. And so this is just the beginning, right? And so I'm grateful for
yeah, there's
you
no
for
better
for
time.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for you to enter into this journey as we are in our early stages, because it gets to
Yes,
look different moving forward, so I'm excited
definitely.
about that. I really am.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much
Yeah,
for having me, Talib. This was
for sure,
great. It just made my
for sure.
night.
Thank you. You too. Thank you. You too. And
Yeah.
so again, Sunday, 12:45 to 1:30 on. If you have tickets for the Afros and Audio Podcast Festival, there'll be a meetup inside the agenda to sign up, and we're just gonna have a good conversation, and then from there we're gonna have more conversations and start figuring out ways that we can implement and demand some implementations, because that's another part of it, because it's not
Definitely.
hard. It's not hard. So thank you. Enjoy the rest of your time outside in the
Yeah,
world today.
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
All
Thank
right.
you, Talib. Stay safe, everybody. Bye.
All right. Thank you everyone for joining. Peace.